Oprah Winfrey interview, and her Netflix series, Harry and Meghan. Now, Meghan is fiercely fighting to have this case tossed, hoping that the judge will dismiss it without a trial.
In a courtroom charged with tension, expectations collapsed in real time. According to explosive reports, Meghan faced a hearing that spiraled fast, as whispers turned to gasps and confidence appeared to falter. Then came the shock, her legal team reportedly walking away, leaving cameras buzzing and critics circling. Supporters reeled, skeptics seized the moment, and the narrative fractured instantly across the global media landscape. So, was this a catastrophic misstep, a misunderstanding amplified by headlines, or a turning point that will redefine her public fight forever? The courtroom, where control slipped away. On that day, one that would soon be whispered about far beyond the courtroom, the air inside the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals felt different. What was supposed to be another predictable stop in a long legal journey slowly transformed into something no one present would forget. The room was calm, orderly, almost boring in its familiarity. Lawyers shuffled papers. Court officials moved with quiet efficiency. Nothing suggested that history, of a sort, was about to unfold. Then the proceedings began. When the gavel came down, it did not feel like a simple signal to start. Witnesses later said it landed with the force of a shockwave, snapping everyone into full attention. In that instant, the carefully maintained confidence surrounding Meghan Markle's legal case began to tremble. The control, the polish, the sense that everything was firmly in hand, those things started slipping away. Right there in open court, Chief Judge William Pryor wasted no time. He did not circle the issues or soften his words. Instead, he moved straight to the heart of the case, targeting the very foundation of the legal arguments being presented. His voice was steady, his delivery measured, but each sentence carried weight. There was no anger, no raised volume, no dramatic flair. He didn't need any of that. His authority filled the room, all on its own. What followed was not a debate. It was not even a back-and-forth exchange. It was a methodical breakdown. Piece by piece, Judge Pryor took apart the legal strategy that had been so confidently assembled. Each argument was examined closely, then calmly set aside. He pointed out gaps, exposed weak reasoning, and highlighted assumptions that simply did not hold up under scrutiny. His words were sharp but clean, precise but unforgiving. It felt less like an argument and more like a lesson, one delivered by someone who had already reached his conclusion. The courtroom reacted in real time. Seasoned attorneys, people who had seen countless hearings and sharp judicial exchanges, reportedly stopped writing altogether. Their pens hovered uselessly above their notebooks as they listened, stunned by the clarity of the judge's reasoning. Journalists leaned forward in their seats, sensing that this was no longer routine reporting material. Even casual observers, unfamiliar with legal language, could feel the shift. Something significant was happening. This was not just another hearing. It was a turning point. At one moment, Judge Pryor dismissed several key claims as missing the issue entirely. In the legal world, such a statement cuts deep. Judges rarely use language like that unless they are signaling serious dissatisfaction. It was not just a rejection. It was a public exposure of failure. To lawyers, it meant the argument had not only failed, but failed at the most basic level. To everyone else in the room, it was unmistakable. This was devastating. The mood changed instantly. The confidence that had once surrounded Meghan Markle's legal team, the sense that they were untouchable, prepared for anything, began to evaporate. What had looked like a powerful, well-oiled machine suddenly appeared fragile. The shine dulled. The mystique faded. There was no dramatic outburst, no visible collapse. And yet, the damage was undeniable. Money, influence, and reputation, things often assumed to guarantee success, offered no protection in that room. The law, stripped of ceremony and status, stood on its own. And in that moment, it was clear which side held the upper hand. By the time the session moved forward, everyone understood they had witnessed more than sharp questioning. They had seen authority assert itself, not loudly, but completely. What began as a routine appearance had become a reckoning, one that left a lasting impression on all who watched the balance of power shift in real time under the steady gaze of the court. At what point did Meghan get humiliated? How did her legal team respond? Let's delve into the details of Meghan's humiliation. The collapse of a dream team in real time. For years, Meghan's legal team had been presented to the public as flawless. They were branded as the very best money could buy. Sharp minds, steady hands, and nerves of steel. In the media, they weren't spoken of as ordinary lawyers. They were portrayed as an extension of Meghan's power itself, strategic, polished, and always 3 steps ahead. The message was clear. This was a team that did not lose, did not stumble, and certainly did not crack under pressure. But inside that courtroom, that carefully built image began to fall apart. As Judge Pryor addressed the room, the mood shifted in ways that were impossible to ignore. What should have been a calm, controlled legal presentation turned tense almost instantly. Observers later described a sense of quiet panic spreading across the defense table. Papers were flipped through too quickly. Notes were checked and rechecked. Hands shook slightly as microphones were adjusted. One lawyer reportedly paused mid-sentence, as though suddenly unsure of what to say next. The confidence that once defined the team didn't just weaken, it drained away. The room could feel it. The energy had changed. Then came the moment that would define the day. Samantha Markle's attorney stood up and delivered a line so sharp, so simple, that it cut straight through months, if not years, of legal planning. He described Meghan's defense as nothing more than a smorgasbord of excuses. The words hit hard. In one sentence, a defense said to cost millions was reduced to a messy spread of weak explanations, loosely arranged and poorly connected. The metaphor was devastating because it was so easy to understand. A smorgasbord suggests excess without focus, quantity without quality. Instead of a strong, clear argument, the defense was framed as a table full of excuses, hoping something, anything, would stick. The courtroom reacted instantly. A few people struggled to hide their smiles. Others exchanged quick looks of disbelief. Even those unfamiliar with legal language understood the power of that phrase. It didn't just criticize the defense, it mocked it. And once spoken, it couldn't be taken back. The words hung in the air, repeating themselves in everyone's mind. But the damage didn't stop there. What followed was almost unthinkable. Meghan's own legal team began to admit errors, out loud, in open court. For any defense team, this would be bad. For a team that had built its entire reputation on precision and perfection, these were not small, easily explained slips. They were acknowledgments that things had gone wrong, that judgments had been flawed, that the strategy was not as airtight as promised. To legal analysts watching the proceedings, this moment marked a turning point. Commentary panels lit up almost immediately. Experts used words rarely associated with elite legal teams: collapse, confusion, self-inflicted damage. Some questioned whether the team had underestimated the case. Others suggested that pressure had finally exposed cracks that had been hidden behind confident press releases and polished appearances. This wasn't just a weak showing. It was a public unraveling. Adding to the drama was Meghan's absence. Known for managing her image with extreme care, she was not there to witness the moment firsthand. The irony was impossible to miss. A woman famous for control and composure was now watching from a distance, as her most trusted and expensive line of defense faltered without her. The optics were harsh. The image of power that once surrounded her, sharp lawyers, perfect preparation, total command, was breaking apart in real time. In that courtroom, her legal empire didn't just face a challenge, it cracked under the weight of its own expectations. And for many watching, the question was no longer whether the defense would recover, but whether the illusion of invincibility had been permanently shattered. Where was Meghan coming from? What kind of background did she have? Let's dive into the details of Meghan's story. The story Meghan told, and the story that wouldn't stay buried. For many years, Meghan Markle presented the world with a carefully shaped story about where she came from. It was a story built on loneliness. She often described herself as having grown up like an only child, navigating life largely on her own, without the warmth or protection of siblings. It was a simple picture, easy to understand, and emotionally powerful. In that version of events, Meghan was self-made, strong because she had to be, independent because there was no one else to rely on. To the public, this story explained a lot. It made her confidence seem hard-earned, her determination admirable, and her guarded nature understandable. To Prince Harry, it may have made her appear especially resilient, someone who survived by trusting herself rather than leaning on family or tradition. It quietly justified her skepticism toward institutions and her instinct to stand apart from them. But there was a problem. For people who knew her background more closely, this story did not fully add up. Half-siblings, extended relatives, and shared histories existed, yet they were largely missing from her public narrative. The contrast between the lonely child she described and the fuller family picture others remembered raised questions that were hard to ignore. Observers began to wonder whether the story she told Prince Harry, the story shared with the royal family, and the story presented to the public could truly all be the same. Each audience seemed to receive a slightly different version, tailored to fit the moment. Those differences created cracks in the image, small at first, but noticeable. Why was her family so absent from her personal history? Why were they not just distant, but almost completely erased? To some critics, this distance did not appear accidental. They argued that cutting ties with family was not only emotional, but also strategic. By placing relatives firmly outside her life story, Meghan could control how, and if, their voices were heard. Anyone who challenged her version of events could be dismissed before they spoke. Any contradiction could be framed as jealousy, resentment, or a grab for attention. This approach, critics say, worked like a shield. By defining herself as alone, she made herself the sole authority on her past. There were no close family members to offer alternative memories or challenge her account. And when relatives did eventually speak out, their words could easily be brushed aside as bitterness from people who felt excluded. For a long time, this strategy appeared effective. Meghan's story went largely unchallenged, repeated in interviews, documentaries, and public discussions. The image of the self-reliant woman who rose above a lonely childhood became part of her brand. It helped shape how the world understood her choices, her conflicts, and her clashes with royal tradition. But stories built on silence have limits. As her public profile grew, so did scrutiny. The more often her background was revisited, the harder it became to keep every detail aligned. Old photographs, past interviews, and the voices of estranged relatives began to surface. Each new detail made the gap between the polished narrative and the messy reality more visible. What once seemed like a clean, inspiring story started to feel incomplete. Questions multiplied. Was the loneliness overstated? Were family ties minimized for convenience? And if parts of the story were simplified, what else might have been left out? Eventually, the narrative reached a point where it could no longer be tightly managed. Once other people entered the conversation with their own memories and perspectives, control began to slip. The shield that had protected the story for years started to crack under the weight of competing truths. In the end, the intrigue was no longer just about Meghan's relationship with the royal family, but about the power of storytelling itself, how carefully chosen details can shape perception, and how the truth, when stretched too far, has a way of pushing back. What kind of reaction did Meghan's humiliation attract from the public? How did it blow out of control? Let's find out. When the internet turned the trial into a global spectacle. Once the tension of the courtroom burst out of its walls and spilled onto the internet, the situation took on a life of its own, far bigger, louder, and more chaotic than Meghan's team had ever prepared for. What began as a tough legal moment quickly turned into something they could no longer steer or soften. The story was no longer living in legal documents or court transcripts. It was alive online, spreading at lightning speed. Social media didn't simply notice what happened. It exploded. Within hours, one single phrase, the now infamous smorgasbord line, caught fire. It hopped from one platform to another like a spark in dry grass. On TikTok, creators rushed to reenact the courtroom scene, some playing the judge with exaggerated seriousness, others mocking the defense with over-the-top drama. Short clips turned into trends. Sounds were reused thousands of times. Each video added a new layer of humor, sarcasm, or disbelief. On Twitter, the reaction was instant and ruthless. Hashtags sprang up almost immediately, poking fun at the defense and questioning the strategy behind it. Tweets flew by the second, many of them sharp, witty, and unforgiving. What lawyers may have seen as a bad day at work was, to the online world, prime entertainment. Reddit took things even further. Entire threads were dedicated to breaking down every word spoken in court. Users pored over transcripts line by line, analyzing tone, timing, and meaning. Legal arguments were stripped of their seriousness and turned into jokes, memes, and running gags. Nothing was too small to escape attention. Every pause, every phrase, every reaction became material. YouTube commentary channels jumped in almost overnight. Videos titled with bold, dramatic phrases pulled in millions of views. Hosts replayed clips, added commentary, and speculated freely about what it all meant. Some laughed, some criticized. Others claimed this moment marked a turning point. Regardless of the angle, one thing was clear: the case had stopped being just a legal matter. It had become a full-blown cultural spectacle. Memes flooded timelines. One popular image showed a row of lawyers standing behind a buffet table, the dishes labeled excuses, deflections, and weak arguments. Skits appeared where actors lip-synced the judge's words, exaggerating them for comedic effect. The courtroom, once a place of seriousness and order, was now being replayed, reshaped, and ridiculed in real time across the internet. And through all of this, Meghan said nothing. There was no public statement, no calm clarification, no carefully chosen words released through trusted media contacts, not even a quiet attempt to redirect the story. The silence was striking and damaging. In the absence of an official response, people filled the gaps themselves. Speculation grew wilder. Assumptions hardened into beliefs. The lack of pushback made it seem, to many observers, as though there was no answer to give. Behind the scenes, the mood was very different. Sources spoke of urgent meetings held behind closed doors, of phones ringing non-stop, of advisors scrambling to figure out what went wrong and how to stop the bleeding. Crisis PR firms were reportedly contacted in haste, asked to perform damage control on a story that was already everywhere. In Montecito, anxiety hung heavy in the air. Prince Harry was said to be visibly stressed, pacing back and forth as conversations went in circles. Advisors tried to regain control of the narrative, but it was already too late. The internet had claimed the story, reshaped it, and decided how it would be told. Every attempt to contain it felt like trying to catch water with bare hands. What made the moment sting even more was the contrast. This was a brand that once stood for sharp planning, confidence, and careful image control. Every move used to feel deliberate. Every message felt polished. Now, that image was cracking. The silence, the scramble, and the loss of control made everything look fragile. In the end, the courtroom loss wasn't just about legal arguments or bad optics. It was about momentum and how quickly it can turn. Once the story escaped into the online world, it stopped belonging to Meghan and her team. It became something else entirely. A spectacle, a joke, and a lesson in how fast power slips away when the internet takes the lead. Why did Meghan's humiliation get so much attention? Was she disliked for any misbehavior in the past? Let's dig into the details of Meghan's tensions with the royal palace. From fairy tale to friction. Meghan Markle's 2018 royal wedding was sold to the world as a modern fairy tale. The images were flawless: carriages, crowds, and a glowing bride stepping into royal history. Yet behind the palace doors, the atmosphere was far less magical. As the wedding approached, reports suggest Meghan's behavior toward palace staff and even senior royals raised serious concerns, painting a picture of tension, clashes, and repeated breaches of royal etiquette. According to royal author Katie Nicholl, Meghan's conduct during the wedding preparations often crossed boundaries long respected within the royal family. One notable incident occurred during a menu tasting at Windsor Castle. Meghan, who was very particular about food and wellness, was reviewing dishes meant for the wedding guests. When she believed she could taste egg in a meal that was meant to be vegan and macrobiotic, she reportedly became visibly angry. Rather than calmly raising the issue, Meghan was said to have sharply confronted a member of the catering staff. This was not merely a case of a stressed bride voicing concern. The tone Meghan allegedly used was harsh enough to alarm others present, and the situation escalated when Queen Elizabeth II unexpectedly entered the room. The Queen, who built her reign on discipline, humility, and respect for workers at every level, was reportedly displeased. According to Nichols' account in The New Royals, the Queen immediately corrected Meghan, firmly reminding her that members of the royal family do not speak rudely to staff. The rebuke was brief but powerful, signaling that Meghan's behavior was unacceptable within palace culture. This incident was not an isolated one. Over time, multiple allegations surfaced, suggesting that Meghan frequently mistreated palace employees. In 2024, royal historian Hugo Vickers added further weight to these claims by recalling problems during Meghan and Prince Harry's time at Frogmore Cottage. According to Vickers, Meghan was allegedly rude to a gardener working on the Windsor grounds. The encounter was reportedly so unpleasant that the head gardener felt compelled to take the complaint directly to Queen Elizabeth herself. Once again, the Queen intervened. Vickers stated that Her Majesty personally addressed Meghan over the matter, clearly expressing her disapproval of disrespectful behavior toward staff. Vickers later remarked that these stories did not surprise him, suggesting that Meghan struggled with how she treated people working under her authority. He described such behavior as very unattractive, stressing that anyone in a position of privilege has a responsibility to show kindness and respect. Meghan's alleged misconduct was not limited to staff. Tensions were also reported within the royal household, particularly between Meghan and her sister-in-law, Kate Middleton. Meghan publicly claimed in her 2021 Oprah Winfrey interview that Kate had made her cry before the wedding, portraying herself as the wronged party. However, other accounts challenge this version of events. Royal author Tom Quinn, in his book Yes Ma'am, The Secret Life of Royal Servants, revealed that the disagreement over bridesmaids' dresses was far more heated on both sides. According to staff who witnessed the fallout, Meghan and Kate both said hurtful things, both lost their composure, and both ended up in tears. Rather than a one-sided incident, the argument reflected Meghan's growing pattern of emotional intensity and conflict during her early days in the palace. Taken together, these reports suggest that Meghan struggled to adapt to royal expectations of restraint, hierarchy, and courtesy. Repeated complaints, royal interventions, and strained relationships indicate that her time in the palace was marked by friction, largely driven by her own behavior. While stress and cultural differences may explain some of the tension, the consistent theme remains clear. Meghan's manner toward staff and family repeatedly clashed with the values of the institution she married into, an issue that would later fuel her dramatic exit from royal life. What effect does Meghan's humiliation have on her reputation? Could it possibly affect her brand? Let's take a look at the likely effects of the humiliation on Meghan. The unexpected aftershock. The shockwaves from the courtroom didn't fade when the cameras switched off or when social media moved on to the next trending joke. Instead, they spread quietly but steadily into places that matter far more than memes and headlines. Behind closed doors in Hollywood offices, publishing houses, and streaming platforms, a different kind of conversation began. Executives started taking a second look at contracts that once seemed untouchable. Business partners paused, recalculated, and asked uncomfortable questions. The central one was simple but heavy. Was the Sussex brand still a safe bet? This was not the kind of situation that could be fixed with a clever statement or a polished interview. It wasn't ordinary public relations damage. It was closer to emergency surgery, a moment where decisions are made quickly because waiting too long could make things worse. Brand triage had begun. For a long time, Meghan Markle's influence rested on a powerful image. she appeared unshakable. Critics came and went, but none seemed to leave a mark. Lawsuits were brushed aside as distractions. Accusations faded into the background noise. Every challenge appeared to slide off without consequence. Over time, this created an aura of invincibility. Whether people admired her or disliked her, many believed one thing: she was always in control. But that sense of control was not as solid as it looked. It relied heavily on perception. As long as the public believed the story was managed, the machine kept running. The moment that belief weakened, the entire structure became vulnerable. That moment arrived in the courtroom. What made this incident different was not just the legal arguments or the headlines that followed. It was the sudden shift in tone. A case that had once been dismissed as trivial, even spiteful, began to look far more serious. Samantha Markle's legal challenge, previously waved away as irrelevant, now appeared to strike at something deeper. It wasn't just a family dispute anymore. It became a test of credibility, and credibility, once questioned, has a way of opening doors that were previously sealed shut. Almost overnight, the atmosphere changed. People who had stayed silent for years began to pay closer attention. Journalists with unresolved questions revisited old notes. Former insiders, once cautious about speaking out, reconsidered their silence. Industry players who had previously avoided controversy started to wonder whether staying quiet still made sense. This is how power truly works. It doesn't come only from winning battles. It comes from discouraging others from even trying. For years, the belief that challenging Meghan would lead nowhere kept many voices at bay. The courtroom disrupted that belief. In one public moment, the fear dissolved, and once fear disappears, curiosity takes its place. The ripple effects were subtle, but telling. Deals that once seemed automatic were now reviewed more carefully. Potential collaborations were weighed against risk. The question was no longer, how big is her reach, but how stable is her image? In industries driven by perception and trust, that distinction matters more than almost anything else. Now, a far more unsettling question hangs in the air. Was this simply a bad day? A rare stumble that could be smoothed over with time? Or was it the beginning of something much larger? If one word, one moment, could turn an expensive legal strategy into a public embarrassment, what would happen when the next controversy arrived? And in public life, another controversy always comes. Meghan Markle's rise was built on careful storytelling, sharp presentation, and the ability to control the narrative. Those tools served her well for years. But control is fragile. Once credibility cracks, it doesn't easily repair itself. Doubt spreads faster than confidence ever did. For the first time, the conversation has shifted. The world is no longer focused on predicting her next move or debating her strategy. Instead, people are asking something far more fundamental. Does she still have the power to steer the story at all? So what do you think about Meghan's humiliation in court? Do you think it serves her right? We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe.